Hello and welcome to our November Patch Tuesday webinar. Today, we have our industry expert, Rob Brown, here to give us an inside look into the newest Patch Tuesday releases. If you have any questions, please add them to the chat and Rob will reach out after. And with that, Rob Brown.
Thank you very much, Johanna. Very warm welcome to everybody joining us today for the November Patch Tuesday webcast. It's an extremely cold but very beautiful day here in the UK. We will start off with some news, and we're going to talk about some 0 days throughout this this particular Patch Tuesday webinar. But I'll be bringing your attention to a few other things of interest, which I think is very important that we cover, especially from a security side. And we've sort of combined a number of years of managed services into this webinar today to hopefully bring to you the things which you should be remediating as soon as possible, but some of the techniques as well that we're using for our managed services to help you make the right decisions. Now, if you're using 2012, last month was the last month you had content officially. There is now an extended form of content for 2012, including 2012 and 2012 R2, called an ESU extension. It's not massively expensive. I was quite surprised. But this will allow you to continue patching for the next 12 months with that extension. I do believe they will run at least 3 or 4 years of this ESU extension. So if you can't move away from 2012 R2, please consider the ESU extension, especially for any internet available devices. So if anything is on the internet, they really should be patched. We also had at the end of last month 23H2, which is a Windows feature update for Windows 11. Now, feature updates are the operating system upgrades, which Microsoft is releasing at the same time as patches. So you have your operating system upgrade, and then you have your patches that sit on top. Now, the thing about the feature update is that once the feature update goes end of life, patches will go end of life as well. So for Windows 11, you probably just started with the original feature update that came with it. You've got 30 months to continue to use 23H2 before you have to upgrade to the next one. Same for Windows 10, but that will be 22H2. And that has a lifespan till 2025. Now, if you're using Syxsense, you can roll out the feature update using the ISO method. And if not, you can go to the Windows update on the device, and actually you can download them manually for the users. Now, one more thing that just come across my desk by the team that sent this to me. It's regarding kind of a unique but a growing vulnerability type for Windows, which is driver management. So over the last couple of days, we've seen that Intel has released a high severity CPU fix for all desktops and servers. In fact, any CPU from Intel, which is using the Alder Lake, Raptor Lake, and the Sapphire Rapids microarchitectures. Now, this can be exploited, although there isn't evidence at the moment that it is being weaponized. But there is a high chance of this becoming weaponized, especially considering not many companies are prioritizing driver management. So if you are not yet using the Windows update for drivers, please go ahead and do that. Otherwise, if you're using Syxsense, you'll be able to deploy those drivers using a custom package inside the console. So please be aware, drivers are potentially a new type of threat, especially with the ransomware increases we've had since COVID. Now, we did have a very interesting release yesterday from CISA. So the Cybersecurity Advisories Infrastructure Security Agency for the US. We like to listen to them. We are following their guidance with a recommendation to install all of these within the next 5 to 7 days. So Adobe is suggesting through CISA that some of these vulnerabilities some of these products have vulnerabilities that may be exploitable and could lead to the control of your system being impacted. We have some common apps in here, like Acrobat and Reader, of course, Photoshop, but we also have some of the maybe less used applications like Cold Fusion and Premiere Pro. However, if you are using these applications, especially some of the subscription-based versions, please ensure that you have your auto update turned on. And if you're using Acrobat and Reader, please make sure that those are included in your patching strategy, especially considering these are high critical vulnerabilities. Microsoft released 57 new fixes yesterday. In fact, that was just under half what we had last month. Got some very interesting data on that as well. Only 3 are critical. So that's really interesting that Microsoft, towards the end of the second half of this year, have been releasing far fewer critical severity vulnerabilities than they have in the first half. 10 of the vulnerabilities are more likely to be weaponized, and that's quite interesting. That's quite a higher number, considering we only had 57 total fixes. 3 are in fact weaponized, though that is where there is an active attack, and we find this out through our partnership with Microsoft and our other antivirus partners as well. They can give us a heads up about the vulnerabilities which are being used in active exploits. We have 3 that are public aware. That doesn't mean the industry knows about the vulnerability. It means that the blueprint to expose is on the internet, and we're going to cover some more on that very soon. But we do have 9 jump points. Now, this is, I think, double the number that we had last month. Now, a jump point can impact any vulnerability of any severity. And basically what it means is that through the exploit of one particular vulnerability, you can hop sideways. We saw this with previous vulnerabilities where they were able to expose through one particular vulnerability, move sideways into the operating system and leave some breadcrumbs for a future attack. So those particular vulnerabilities we call a jump point. In the CVSS, it's called changed. So if you are following the CVSS standard, it is called a CVSS scope, and where you see the scope is changed, that indicates that you can exploit through one and move sideways and take over the system in another area of the operating system. Extremely serious. Now, over the last 12 months, we've been following the bug types that have been fixed by Microsoft. And for all of the months except for 2, we've always had remote code execution vulnerability at the highest number of fixes in that Patch Tuesday month. This happens to be the second month where elevation of privilege vulnerability is the number 1. That's when a threat actor gains access to an employee's account or bypasses the proper authorization channel and successfully grants themselves access to data they're not supposed to have. Interestingly enough, Microsoft Threat Intelligence are suggesting that elevation of privilege can lead to remote code execution. So one leads to the other, which means if you do have a higher number of vulnerabilities that are elevation of privilege, it may lead to a greater risk of attack with any of the other bug types. So please pay particular attention. If you are choosing patches based on the type of vulnerability or the type of bug, then elevation of privilege should be included by default. Remote code execution is and has been the highest number, the highest risk, the highest threat, and that's a class of cyber attack in which attackers remotely execute commands to place malware or other malicious code on your computer or network. So incredibly serious. Spoofing is an act of disguise. Actually, one of those has been weaponized, so we need to talk about that. Information disclosure, that's when when a program unintentionally reveals sensitive information, and we have one of those vulnerabilities which can, if exploited, expose your password. So very serious there. Denial of service, that's just when you want to stop a service from running or cause a server to shut down, making it inaccessible. And a security feature bypass is when an attacker bypasses the authentication mechanisms of a device to gain unauthorized access. So we do have a lot to talk about, but first we're going to talk about how we prioritize all of the vulnerabilities that we had yesterday from Microsoft and actually help you understand how we look at a vulnerability with all of this different data, with all these different data points and suggestions through some of the incredible security teams around the world that are trying to offer their recommendations for prioritization. Well, we use a system called a Syxsense score. Syxsense score takes a multi-factored approach at looking at a particular vulnerability and tries to allow you to come up with your own strategy that best suits the risks that you're prepared to take. Now, the first of those is based on the severity. So, of course, we have to use the vendor severity in that selection process, and that ranges from critical, high, medium, all the way down to NA. And obviously, with anything critical, it's more serious to be included. And anything NA is probably not a security vulnerability at all, just say a bug fix or something like that. But we also want to combine that with something more independent, and that's the CVSS score. So the CVSS score, which now is version 4.0, although it hasn't changed from 3.1 to 4.0 really, the base score is still the score of the vulnerability itself, but it's out of 10. So 10 being the very highest severity, 0 being the lowest severity, and it kind of gauges down from 10 to 7 is 10 to 9 is critical, 9 to 6.9 is high, etc., etc. Now, when you put the two together, you have a better understanding of a severity where instead of just using one of these alone. And interestingly enough, a lot of vendor issued severities that are medium risk can sometimes have a very high CVSS score. So you balance the two, and it gives you a better, more transparent selection for the vulnerabilities that matter, that you need to remediate. Then we've got the state of the vulnerability. We call this weaponized. That means it's under active exploit. And so we get this data from our from Microsoft Threat Intelligence, but also through our through our antivirus partners. When a vulnerability has become weaponized, when they have the evidence that suggests this is being used in an active exploit, we obviously mark that true. It doesn't always change the vendor severity and the CVSS score. So that is something to be aware. It does not, and sometimes mostly does not impact the severity or the score at all. Once you can imagine these vulnerabilities have been around for a very long time. Some of them become weaponized, having been released in previous Patch Tuesdays. Some, of course, can be weaponized inside the last Patch Tuesday. And going back through the historical data is very, very difficult. There's an awful lot of work to do. So that weaponized flag really does help you to elevate a risk if something is now becoming weaponized, even if the vendor severity is medium or low. Public aware, as I said before, does not mean the industry is aware of the vulnerability. It means that the precise method to exploit is available on the internet. It's been published somewhere. These are often known as bug bounty programs, and those bug bounty programs are publishing known exploits on a public forum. Sometimes you see them on YouTube, but they will show you how to exploit a vulnerability, and that does give you another data point in the decision that you make whether or not you're going to remediate that vulnerability or not. So we're moving away from a single centric approach to severity-based vulnerabilities, but actually adding the data together, making your selection a little bit more intelligent. To balance it, we have a countermeasure. So not all vulnerabilities can be deployed quickly. Some environments, a lot of our environments that work in retail or banking, they have to follow a very strict rollout schedule of deploying to test machines, to proof of concept machines first, before moving to pilot and to live devices. Now, in this scenario, a countermeasure may change the speed in which you roll out that update. A countermeasure could exist, which is called a mitigation, which means that there is you may have a next generation antivirus that actually protects you. It could be that you have a firewall, or that something's not installed, in fact, on your devices by default, which effectively mitigates the need to deploy the patch as urgently as you would need to. Or you have a workaround. Maybe you could deploy a registry key or a group policy setting that would alleviate the need to deploy that update. So taking the countermeasure into consideration, you have a way of prioritizing your patches to remediate those vulnerabilities. Now, finally, if you're a Syxsense customer, we can help you with your exposure. So obviously, the more of your environment that is exposed for a vulnerability, which happens to be higher criticality, higher CVSS score, is weaponized, is public aware, and has no countermeasures, that gives you kind of an idea of where you should be prioritizing your remediations for your environment. And we're going to run to our website. Now, we have updated our website. It absolutely looks fantastic. If you've seen us last month, we actually do publish our Patch Tuesday directly to the web on Patch Tuesday evening, so you can take a look at the write-up before this webinar. And if you do have any questions next month when you go and view that, you can subscribe to the site as well. Now, if you go to the syxsense.com website, you'll find the resources section, and the resources section contains all of the articles that we're posting, including Patch Tuesday, but we also do a lot of articles on endpoint protection, best practices, zero trust, etc. If you do have any questions for us, whether you have a testing strategy or best practices, use the chat function in the corner and just ask for those, and we'll send you all of the materials we have to help you on your way. And of course, if you do like what you're seeing from a Syxsense product perspective, you can book a demo there if you like, and one of our specialists will walk you through our best practices around patch management and security vulnerability management. Under the recent posts, you'll find the November Patch Tuesday. I have all of these links already open, just it helps to make this a little bit faster. And this is what we published yesterday. So we did have 57 fixes that covered everything from Microsoft, Windows components, Exchange. We had quite a few Exchange, in fact, Microsoft Office. We had some Visual Studios, some Azures, and have a very interesting one for Hyper-V, which I'll talk about. Usually I cover 3 recommendations each month, but because I was unable to select 3 because they all had the same SIX score, I'm actually going to talk about 5. So we're actually going to cover 5 today. Now, the reason why it was really difficult for me to distinguish the priorities, and that's where you have a single centric approach when you're selecting based on criticality or whether you're using another form, is because although we had half the number of fixes this month than we had last month, the average CVSS score was actually higher than last month. So although we had less fixes, they all were higher in severity, which I thought was really interesting, especially as we're coming towards the end of the year. Now, on all of that, we have 3 of these which are weaponized. We actually have 3 of those also, which is public aware. One of those weaponized is both weaponized and public aware, and that's the first one we're going to talk about. Now, CVE 2023-36033. This is a Windows DWM core library. This is an elevation of privilege vulnerability. And one thing about the webinar is that I don't always know all of the Microsoft technology, so I had to do some research, and the DWM is the Desktop Windows Manager. So Desktop Windows Manager came in Vista, I think, And that's where you've got this new cool looking 3D application icons. So where you have where you had before, where it was very flat, you now have a more 3D look. And this is the actual core library that allows that 3D look to display in both the screen, but also in your applications that are presented to your monitor. So every single operating system is impacted for this, so whether it's a server or a workstation. This is the one that is both weaponized and public aware. Has a CVSS of 7.8. Now, its risk or its threat risk is relative. It has an attack vector of local, so you will need local access to the network, but it does have low attack complexity, low privileges, and no user interaction. So if you can get onto that network, what you will be able to do is to gain system privileges of that vulnerable system. So pretty serious. Second one is CVE 2023-36025. And this is the Windows Smart Screen Security Feature Bypass vulnerability. Now, we talked about this before. This actually has been a couple of months now. This is where the Smart Screen is a method that is supposed to protect you from opening something that isn't actually what it really is. So it's a way of obfuscating a document, a PDF, or a file on your PC. It looks like it's something and it's not, and you go and then open it up. And this is a way of bypassing it. So that security that's supposed to say, hey, by the way, this is not what we think it is. You know, those sort of pop-ups you see that you always click yes to. This is actually a way of bypassing it. And this is another vulnerability that is in fact weaponized. Has a CVSS of 8.8. However, its greatest threat risk is that it has a network attack vector, which is any network including the internet. So if you do have a server or a device that is accessible from the internet, this potentially could be at risk. It has low attack complexity, no privileges, but does require an end user to click something. So if you've at least told your users not to click something, then that's maybe part of your security process, which mitigates that from being urgently required. But other than, I would highly recommend that you do include that in your rollout. CVE 2023-36036. This is a Windows Cloud Files mini filter driver elevation of privilege vulnerability. Again, I had to read up on what this was. Now, actually, interestingly enough, this is used for managing the operations of cloud-stored files. Believe it or not, everyone is using your favorite file storage. So the device, the driver that is used to upload and download files to cloud storage is in fact part of almost every operating system, and therefore very urgent that you include this. This is also weaponized with a CVSS score of 7.8, has no countermeasures. It, however, does require local access to the device, so on a LAN or a WAN. It has low attack complexity, low privileges, no user interaction. The next one is also one that we talked about last time, which is the Windows Pragmatic General Multicast. It is a remote code execution vulnerability. Now, this one is serious. It has the joint highest CVSS score of the list. There's one other at 9.8. However, it isn't on every device by default. So the Windows messaging and the PGM multicast service has to be turned on, but it's not turned on by default. So potentially this isn't as risky, but if you are unsure, if you have devices where this has been configured and left, then you should look for a TCP port 1801 on the device. So if you can see TCP port 1801 listening on the device, or you can see a service called message queuing running on the device, then absolutely this must be prioritized. Its attack vector is high threat risk because it's available over any network, including the internet. So incredibly important. But as I said, not on most of your devices. I hope you won't have this enabled. Its attack complexity is low, no privileges, no user interaction. And lastly, the Microsoft Office security feature bypass. Now, we've all used Microsoft Office, Excel, or PowerPoint Access documents. Every now and again, you open up a document that has inside of it something special, like a VB code or a macro. And when you are actually opening these up, it tells you. It says, "Hey, by the way, there's something in here which could be a bit dodgy." Well, this particular vulnerability allows you to bypass that feature completely. Now, it does have a CVSS of 6.5, but it is public aware. It is the highest rated non-critical kind of medium CVSS, but it was raised up because of its public aware status and the fact that this is probably going to be on every single device that has a Microsoft Office application installed. So incredibly serious. There is no countermeasure, I'm afraid. Now, this can be exploited over any network, including the internet, with low attack complexity, no privileges whatsoever, but does require the end user to click something or to read an email or to open up an attachment. So if that can be exploited, it's very, very serious. Now, all of the other vulnerabilities, as I mentioned, have been detailed below. Just take the reference here, the CVE reference, add that into your tool set. So if it's Windows Update, for example, or WSUS, go ahead and put that reference into your tool set. Same for Syxsense, go ahead and do that. And then if you have any of these vulnerabilities detected across a high proportion of your environment, please add that to your priority list. The one thing I want to mention, which had actually just come across my desk, is a hypervisor vulnerability. Now, hypervisor is used since COVID as well. A lot of customers of ours are using hypervisor to run a guest operating system on their device, which is isolated from the physical device. So they have a laptop, they run this hypervisor guest. They then start the VPN and they access the corporate network through that VPN. There is a vulnerability that is solved in here. However, it does have a jump point, which means that from the guest, you can effectively jump to the host. Incredibly serious, especially if that is a secure station where you're accessing your company network from that hypervisor guest. So please, if you're using hypervisor, again, use your Windows servicing search facility. Find if you're using the Windows hypervisor on your devices. If you do, make sure you install that inside your strategy this month. And that is really it. I hope this is you found this useful. If there's any questions, we'd love to answer those privately. And until December, I wish you happy patching. Thank you very much.